Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here today. My name is Aparna Galiaso. I lead the retail and CPG business development teams for North America at Amazon Web Services. And today I'm really excited to be here with two customer stories of how our customers in retail and CPG are innovating using cloud and AI to drive competitive advantage within their companies. I'll set off the stage with a couple of minutes here on why this matters, and then I'll pass on to my speakers, Chris and JC. So let's get going. Let's start with a conversation quickly about just the most common technology that we're all talking about today, Gen AI. So as we've seen over the past few years, Gen AI has moved from art of possible to proof of concept to we have lots of use cases in production to the point where we're really starting to think about business value with Gen AI. The problem is, just as all of this has been happening, companies are still feeling stuck because now we're talking about agents and multi-agent orchestration. There never seems to be a moment in which you're able to get ahead of the curve with Gen AI or with any other technology for that matter. And that's where, for any of you in the audience who were there last year, I used this example and it still stands true a year later. How many of you remember reading Alice in Wonderland? Anybody? Alice in Wonderland? There we go. So for those of you who don't remember, or those of you who need a reminder, Alice is running and running and running in Wonderland, the Red Queen's race. And she's running as fast as she can, but she realizes she cannot get ahead. She's stuck in exactly the same place. And this is where our CPG companies, this is how they're feeling. They feel that no matter what they do to get ahead of the Gen AI curve, that they're stuck in exactly the same place. Now, we're in a pivotal moment with CPGs in general. We're at this point where there's unprecedented change in the marketplace. Consumer expectations are higher than ever, and consumers are expecting you to move at the pace at which their minds are changing. However, margins have gotten tighter because the cost of serving these consumers has increased. And at the same time, you also don't see that the pace of change of technology is decelerating. It's actually accelerating. Everything is moving faster, and companies are forced to have an ability to keep an agile approach to their future development. Now, the problem is this. The C-suite in these companies is used to thinking about consumers, and they may know where to head strategically, but they are not very well aware of how to use algorithms or how to keep ahead with the pace of change of technology to serve their consumers. And so really where this puts us is a very simple place, right? We're at this pivot point. You could think of it as a pendulum swinging. And the pendulum has swung from a place where IT was more of a reactive service provider, following what business would set as a strategic direction, to being there in the front end, helping set the business direction with IT. Now, arguably, this pendulum analogy fails because I don't think the pendulum's ever going to swing back. The pendulum is probably going to move into a future new state where you think about CPGs not only being in the business of selling products, but being in the place of building new digital-first business models. Now, what this means is if you think and you look forward, companies all talk about transformation. And what does transformation really mean? Transformation in the future is going to require IT and business leaders to show up together and to tackle business decisions together. You're going to have IT that is making sense of the AI capabilities that are out there and translating that into business opportunities. You will also have IT part of the situation on the back end, taking those business opportunities and converting them into technical roadmaps. And so essentially, think about it this way. The point here really is that IT is no longer sort of invited to have a seat at the table. Really, if you look at the future and how business decisions are going to be made, you need IT to be an essential voice at that table. And so today we're going to have two stories, different paths, same outcome, elevating IT into that position of strategic partnership at CPG companies. We're first going to have Chris. He's going to talk about how he's been building an automation platform at Mondelez that has allowed him and his team to be positioned as agile innovation partners to the business. Then we will have JC, and he will talk about how he's gone more in a FinOps route to use agentic AI to elevate decision-making around AI and other cost plays to the executive leaders in the company. And with that, I'll pass on to Chris.
Thank you. Thanks, Aparna, for that great introduction. And so, as you said, we've been focused a lot on trying to make sure that our foundation is sound, right? We need to be agile. We have a very aggressive strategy of many acquisitions and divestitures in our company. And so we really need to be agile, and therefore our foundations need to be sound, and we need to be able to enable the business to move quickly. So just a little bit of introduction, or my agenda I want to share with you today is around, a little bit about Mondelez, our cloud journey so far, and then the platform that we've built, and how we've scaled that for hundreds of accounts and thousands of pipelines and applications, how we manage our costs, and then a little bit about what's next for us. So I guess you may not have heard about the Mondelez brand, but hopefully you've had many of our products. Oreo is a big favorite of mine. Obviously Cadbury, mini eggs. I'm really thankful we only get them at certain times during the year because it would be bad if we didn't, for me. But yeah, so just a little bit about Mondelez. We do about 36 billion in revenue in last year, so and growing, as I said before. There we go. So I'll start with a little bit of a history of Mondelez, right? So we're technically a young company. We were born from the Kraft Food split in 2012, but we have a very long history, right? You recognize a lot of those brands are not just from 2012, right? So a lot of our company is taking on that heritage of all of those companies and brands that have joined together to make Mondelez what it is today. Our cloud journey, like a lot of CPG companies, started around 2018. We were doing very much a lift and shift from the data centers at the time, and more in a managed service provider model, right, where we didn't have maybe all of the expertise at the time, like most of us didn't at that time, and we were relying on getting everything to the cloud. The journey lasted a couple of years, and actually late 2020. One of our largest regional SAP systems, we actually failed to get that cut over, and it's been in the data center ever since. So I like to think about it as, a lot of the hardest things that we had to migrate, unfortunately, we still had left over in 2021 when we started our cloud engineering team. So actually, that's when I joined Mondelez, and I think I had a really great opportunity because we didn't have a cloud engineering capability within Mondelez at the time, but I was empowered or able to build a team from scratch, which was really an awesome opportunity. So between 2021 and 2024, we gradually grew the team from just me in 2021. The first year, we hired our first 6-7 engineers. And by 2024, we have a global team of over 30 engineers that are working on our platform. And this culminated in 2024 with our strategic partnership that we signed with AWS. And then later in 2025, when we announced that we were going to do all of our SAP RISE environment on AWS as well. So when we started this cloud engineering capability, we got to do a greenfield environment. And these were some of our guiding principles. So a lot of the engineers and I that started, we had already kind of gone through this journey once, learning our way through it. And we really tried to be very thoughtful about what were those principles that we wanted to have that would be different, and what we were trying to achieve. So you see a lot of them there, right? We really had this concept of making sure that we were going to have a self-service platform for developers. That was enabling and empower developers to do the right thing and to do it quickly and easily. So, secure by default, automation of absolutely everything. Everything is infrastructure as code. Making sure we had micro-segmentation. I remember talking to our SA, who's here in the crowd, on our first day saying, I know we have no accounts today, but I want to know what happens when we hit 1,000. Right? And it was a little bit funny then, but really satisfying to see it come to life today. So a lot of these principles were really what we tried to take forward into the design that we had. There we go. So what we have today is, I would say, this controlled, easy, self-service platform. And we started to adopt, as we were building it, some of the buzzwords in the industry around, platform engineering, golden path, enabling constraints. And really what our kind of mantra was, we want to put the power of the cloud in the hands of all capable developers. in a secure and centralized way so that we can make changes rapidly and not have things age and get out of date and need to be constantly replaced. So kind of an evergreen approach to making sure that we have the guardrails and the controls in place to enable people to do the right thing. And really the biggest principle here, and I think the thing I'm most proud of that we've done as the team, is making sure that all of this is infrastructure as code. So when a request comes in for a new product or a new application, what we do is we deploy all of these things that you see here, the GitHub code repository, all of the branches, static branches for the code that correspond with all of the AWS environments that the application needs. So if you need a production and a non-production, you have two branches in the code repository that are mapped there, automatically connected with the CI/CD pipelines to watch those repos for pull requests and get those deployed to the AWS applications. And this is just a kind of a simple example to show you another version of what we had on that previous slide. So you have some product or some application with one request. All that you see here is automatically provisioned, and this includes, as I said, the GitHub repository with all of our controls, all of our branch protection rules, where we can enforce our GitOps standards that we want to follow. We use Spacelift, which is our Terraform deployment CI/CD tool, and we automatically create individual stacks that are tracking these static branches, so that when a developer pushes change in Terraform into one of these branches, it gets picked up and it does a Terraform plan against the AWS environment, and the developer can see what those changes will be and then either reject them or confirm them and push them to production. And then on the top, we also generate automatically in that single provisioning standard roles. And you see them across the top. There's actually more than this because there's an individual role per environment. But for the sake of simplicity, we really have DevOps owner and DevOps contributor and read only. And so these roles have different capabilities across the different platforms automatically. And this kind of gives you, kind of how that works, right? So you see the roles across the top. All of them are automatically created and available within 20, 30 minutes, maybe from the time that the request goes through in our identity governance system. And all of the requests for membership automatically get routed to the business owner of that product, right? So there's no central team that has to decide whether or not John gets access as a developer. That goes to the business owner of the application to manage themselves. And again, I think really the best thing about the environment that we've built is, if you see on the bottom, again, no matter the most powerful role that we're provisioning is all just read-only access in AWS. So you don't have ability to go in and manually edit, click, create, change things. And this is how we're making sure that we are owning and controlling the path to production. So a little bit more code or detail around those requests. So again, on the left, you'll see just some Terraform. It's obviously too small to read, but another view on the right of all of the things that get provisioned automatically when you make this request. The GitHub repository, the branches, all of the standard rules, the CI/CD pipelines, and then all of the standard components in the AWS account that gets vended. So we're using Account Factory for Terraform, right? And then we're able to seed that account when it gets created with all of the things that each account will need to be able to manage its own environment, including delegated DNS for the account and our standard backup strategy and tags for AWS backup, and all of our security tooling and all of the automation to get all of those logs securely into our SOC. And then another view. So again, in the middle, you'll see that same code snippet, but just to kind of give you a flavor, this is how we provision network, right? So there's nothing special or a separate ticket that needs to be created. So if your application, in this example, is a public-facing application, the system knows that, and we know that, because in the request, you can see it says that it's requesting regional public subnets. So we've got standard regions that we deploy to, and all you need to tell it is what's the CIDR block range, the size that you need per region, and then this will provision automatically through the provisioning process all of the VPC and network that you need to connect both to our AWS core network and then back in through our transit gateway into the Mondelez network itself. And so this is something I think is pretty easy once you see it, but it was a very long and hard process that a lot of really smart engineers were able to put together. So this just kind of gives you a flavor of some of that automation that we tried to strive for. So I've said this a couple times, right? But really, we're trying to make sure that we're enforcing GitOps, right? So this is the slide that I think kind of tells that story the best. So again, it's all been provisioned. You have two environments in this example called non-prod and production. And those static branches are the ones that have the branch protections on them. A DevOps owner or a DevOps contributor who has access to this GitHub repo can go and create a pull request, make their changes, initiate the pull request, right? And once that pull request is seen by our Spacelift stack, it sees that, it triggers a plan, and then it gives immediate feedback to the developer of, here's the resources that you are trying to create in this environment. Do you want to approve or apply it or reject it? And then once the merge is complete into the static branch, again, it officially runs, and the developer gets one last chance to look at that plan, make sure that it's not going to do anything awful, and then confirm that. And that's how we get all of our resources in each AWS account. I think the important things on this slide too, there's that little circle on the bottom that says OPA policy enforcement. This is key for us. This allows us in every pipeline that we've automatically provisioned, we can attach our policy to all of those stacks. So this is very powerful because we're able to keep updating our security standards and our guardrails and controls as we go to make sure that as plans and applies come through, they meet our latest and greatest standards. So an example is, we have a lot of private Terraform modules that we develop that enforce our own standards. At this layer, we can say, you know what, you can deploy as many S3 buckets as you want, go right ahead, but you have to do it with our Spacelift module, with our Terraform module that enforces all of the Mondelez standards. And again, this is really, I think, where the concept of enabling constraints come in, because we're constraining you, right? We're constraining the developers, telling them you can only do it this way. But it's got to be an enabler, right? It's got to be something that they want. It's got to be a pull, not a push, right? It's got to be something where, oh, wow, I don't have to worry about the 150 settings that I could set on an S3 bucket. I can actually say S3 bucket name, and that's it, because I know it has sane defaults that are going to meet all of our security policies and all of our best practices. And again, because we've deployed all of this with infrastructure as code, and I have an example where we realized that we weren't enforcing TLS 1.3 in our load balancers a year and a half in. It was just an oversight. We just didn't do it. It's like, oh, that's bad. We need to fix that. So we went and pushed a policy that just checked to make sure that that's there in every stack that we have. So it gives us one single place to make a single change in line of code and impact thousands of CI/CD stacks and hundreds of AWS accounts all at once. So, so I think that's really the heart of what it is that we're building. Another example is you see OpenTofu, right? So when the Terraform licensing changed, we were able to relatively quickly, I don't want to do disservice to the people who had to make sure that this change was tested and rolled through, but we can say now all of the stacks in our environment are on OpenTofu, which is something that would be extremely hard to do if you had hundreds and thousands of different CI/CD stacks. You would have to rely on each team to go and make that change, whereas we said, we want to be OpenTofu now, so that's what we're going to do. So really power in that. So a little bit more, again, about some of this and some of the key concepts behind it. Again, when Amazon Q, we're a big Amazon Q developer shop, right? So when Amazon Q developer started doing PR reviews, where you could have Amazon Q do your PR review, again, one line of code and all of the different repositories, we could go hook that up and enable that across the environment very, very quickly. And on the Spacelift side, right, again, our OPA agent, so we can write our policies, we can enforce the various policies to make sure that not only are you following best practice, but you're doing it in a way that forces collaboration. So again, if our standard module is so restricted that a development team finds that it's not usable for them, there's one of two things that's going at play there. Either one, they don't quite understand what best practice is, and it gives you a chance to say, oh no, you can't deploy that S3 bucket without encryption at rest, right? So no, request denied. Or it's a new use case, right, that we've not thought of before. Again, one place, one source code, even do a pull request, right? We can review it, we can update that module so that the next developer, the next team, in our environment, it might be another third-party developer coming in, but they all benefit. So it's this forced collaboration, which also is made possible by the enforcements and the guardrails and the controls that we have. And then again, on the AWS side, on the accounts, really proud to say that we have read-only access primarily, right? So instead of wondering whether or not an account is in a certain state, it's been kind of neat that I've been able to answer questions for security by just going to our GitHub org and searching, right? Because I don't need to check the account. I know that what's in the Git repo is going to represent, at least if it's in the main branch, right? It's going to represent what we have in our environment. So I think very powerful there. And again, this line between what we can do in our CI/CD pipelines from a control perspective versus what we do in the AWS account itself. We try to do belt and suspenders, right? So we still have Wiz that's trying to scan everything. If it finds something that's bad, that's not right, we can go and fix it, and it allows us to then figure out, well, how can we write more policies so that it never even gets there, as opposed to finding it and trying to remediate it and get it later. So I guess the last bit here, of course, it's always about cost. So this is just a random snapshot from our AWS Kudos dashboard. So if you're not familiar, the Kudos dashboards is something AWS will give you for free in QuickSight. What I really like about it, again, this whole concept of microsegmentation. Not only can you not screw up someone else's application, right? But you also know all of the costs that are in a particular AWS account. You don't have to worry about, well, are all the tags up to date? Are they all right? Are they all allocated the right way? My former experience when we had more, I guess, monolithic mega accounts is tagging was always an issue, right? And so I never trusted what was the actual cost for a particular application because I was always worried that someone, fat-fingered something and it had a typo and it didn't show up in the report, or maybe a developer had forgotten to do it. So again, there's a lot of power in making sure that I can say to any application or product owner, you want to know what your cost is? Do you want to know it by the second? Do you want to know it by the day? You want to know by the month? Do you want to know your trend? Your budget? What do you want to know, right? And so that microsegmentation has been something that's really helped us with that other principle that I put up there around cost transparency and being really efficient and being able to tell what our costs are per environment. There it goes. So a little bit, I guess, for what next, right? So we're actually at Mondelez, we're on I guess, more of an organizational journey to products and platforms, which is really helping us. We talk, my team and I, about how we kind of created a platform where there weren't a whole lot of customers, right? So we kind of built something that no one was begging for. But this has been really awesome for us because now we're really creating, in our product teams, we're creating the customers that really don't know it yet, but they really want this, right? So when they're asked, what's your TCO? And they ask us, how much of my cloud costs? I go, here's your dashboard. Go look at it yourself, right? So I think really trying to enable or leverage what we've built so far to take that next step for really drive even more transparency in our company. We're also in the middle, or I guess not even in the middle, we're trying to wrap up a lot of our legacy cloud migration, right? So I said we're left with a lot of on-prem data center stuff that was kind of the hardest things to tackle. We're on the cusp of shutting one of them down, 2 out of the 4 down early in 2026, with the last one being our big SAP environment that never got moved, which has a separate timeline, but really excited to close down those data centers. And then, of course, we're not done then, right? Like we've done some lift and shift and some cleanup and some opportunistic changes, but what we need to do then is go back and refactor and re-engineer and make serverless where we can make serverless, and really continue to evolve from that perspective. And then, of course, plug the AWS, right, to leverage our AWS strategic partnership, really looking as a CPG company, right, like, well, we also sell a lot of products to Amazon.com. How do we make that better? How do we leverage the digital media and advertising and everything else? So really excited for that next step as well. So that was it for me. So thank you for allowing me to share our story. So, and now I'm going to turn it over to JC to share some of his experience with Grainger. So thanks, JC.
Thanks, Chris.
Yep.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Aparna. Welcome. Excited to be here and talk to you a little bit about our FinOps journey. But first, our roadmap today is going to follow a problem to solution journey that I think a lot of teams of specialists can relate to. First up, though, I'll provide a brief introduction to Grainger and then dive into our strategic challenge. How do teams of specialists close the knowledge gap at enterprise scale? Then we'll dive into an initial proof of concept where we inevitably hit an impossible math problem. And we'll talk about why we chose generative AI as a solution. And it's important to note it wasn't without its challenges. So we'll step through the journey on the path to production, and then I'll introduce Project Nightingale. And lastly, we'll talk about the results. I'll give a brief demo, and we'll discuss where we think this is going next. So, first, Grainger. Grainger is a leading broadline distributor and the largest MRO company in North America. To give you a sense of our scale, in 2024, we generated over $17.2 billion in revenue and serving over 4.5 million customers with 30 million plus products available globally. We employ over 26,000 team members, and we've been fulfilling our core motto of keeping the world working since 1927. What differentiates Grainger is the fact that we combine assortment, technology, and high-touch solutions via complex technology and digital infrastructure. That digital infrastructure, that's where our FinOps story begins. So first, the challenge, right? The strategic challenge. I think anybody in security, platform, SRE, or DevOps will relate to this challenge. Critical insights remain trapped in complex systems. You have valid and thorough reporting, but your stakeholders, they're busy. They don't have expert knowledge to interpret the data. No one's coming to your dashboards, right? Attempting manual communication with these stakeholders through email, Slack, one-on-one meetings, workshops, it simply cannot keep up with the pace of enterprise growth. So for us, in the context of FinOps, the reality was that as our federated cloud adoption continued to accelerate, we faced this pivotal moment where we had to pivot from centralized cost optimization and cloud cost management to democratize FinOps with enterprise-wide adoption of FinOps practices and principles. So what did we do first? We identified a target demographic that had the highest return of value. For us, that was a product and technical domain leaders. These leaders hold large swaths of cloud utilization and control the levers of prioritization and roadmaps. FinOps also serves multiple other personas. We have product, of indirect procurement, engineering teams, senior executives, and finance. But this particular demographic, was critical to influencing our overall cloud efficiency and effectiveness. So how did we meet this demographic? We landed on executive summaries, a format that they were familiar with, delivered to their inbox, a place where they were already working. We couldn't expect them to come to us. We couldn't expect them to change their ways of working and visit our dashboards. So no new tools, no behavior change required on their part. These executive summaries were generated manually by our team of FinOps specialists. A few of them are in the room today. And essentially they consist of everything an executive leader needs to know. And they can walk away within 5 minutes with the full understanding of their cloud usage, its growth, and optimization opportunities. But we quickly ran into a problem. These summaries took, on average, about 1 full engineering day to write. We started off with an initial group of just 6 domain leaders, but we had an eventual audience of initially 30, growing to 50 recipients. So we were talking about up to 4,800 engineering hours a year to serve just one persona. That simply didn't scale. The good news, though, leaders engaged with the summaries and they took action. We actually saw people starting to take action now that they were informed about their cloud usage. So, meeting this impossible math problem, we knew we had to look elsewhere for the solution. We had validated the theory that executive summaries delivered to the inboxes of leaders would bring about engagement and action. So we had to find a way to scale it enterprise-wide. Initially, as I said, manual summaries were quite time-intensive, but they had quality that only FinOps specialists could provide. We evaluated essentially 3 core approaches at the end of the day: manual and programmatic, and then ultimately generative AI. So why not programmatic, right? At the end of the day, programmatic solutions could meet the scale that we were facing. But the problem is they lack the nuance, the tailored, customized metrics, trends, and analysis that our FinOps specialists were able to create on their own. So we had to shelve the idea of a programmatic solution and seek out alternatives. That's what ultimately led us to generative AI, and it changed what was possible. We found that with the right constraints, templated prompts, organizational data served through the right tools, generative AI could meet that specialist quality of our FinOps analysts, but at an enterprise scale. So, let's talk about some of the initial challenges, though, because it wasn't all gumdrops and jelly beans. It's one thing to, evaluate and assess a generative AI proof of concept on your laptop. Most of us could get a little POC working in a weekend. It's an entirely different prospect to take that to production. For us, when we started out as a cloud team, we were familiar with traditional IAC approaches using Terraform and Boto 3 to interact with AWS resources, but they simply weren't keeping up with the pace of generative AI innovation. We found Terraform to be really clunky, and often the AWS provider didn't have the configurations we needed for our agents. So we pivoted and we found Strands agents. With Strands agents, we were able to define agents and line in our source code and quickly accelerate on our goals. The second core problem, though, was unlike most generative AI solutions, we weren't building a chatbot. We didn't have variable questions and variable responses. We needed consistent, deterministic outcomes from what are essentially probabilistic models. Our solution, we developed a headless MCP client. No human interaction required whatsoever, and the output is the product itself. Thirdly, enterprise constraints. We couldn't just go pick up any vendor tool or solution off the shelf, right? Within the enterprise, we had to adhere to security, procurement requirements, legal requirements. And so we had to find a best-in-class solution that was able to meet our requirements while also provide an answer. With that, we stumbled upon Agent Core, which was still in preview, but quickly learned that it would provide the enterprise requirements as well as the configuration and ease of authentication, observability, and monitoring that our team needed within a very short runway. And then lastly, as I mentioned, productionizing. It's not exactly that simple, right? We were developing something that was semi-novel, not being a chat bot, and so we didn't really have a lot to reference. Agent Core was also in preview. It lacked documentation, and often we had to dive into the source code of Agent Core itself to find answers. So that path to production eventually led to us creating Project Nightingale. Leveraging Agent Core, Amazon Bedrock with Claude models, we were able to construct analyst quality FinOps cloud cost intelligence at enterprise scale. This essentially consists of two key agents, a FinOps analyst and an executive summary writer that specializes in synthesizing financial analysis into executive-friendly narratives. This multi-agent architecture unlocked the capability to meet that enterprise scale. But the agents alone weren't just the answer. We also built our own MCP server with custom MCP tools. Underneath this is a series of different data sets, including organizational data, recommendations from Cost Optimization Hub, and billing data from our Cloud Cost Management tool. So let's talk a little bit more about this solution. As I mentioned, one of our requirements were we needed consistent output with our executive summaries. We couldn't have hallucinations, we couldn't have errors, or we would quickly lose trust of our stakeholders. The data had to be reliable, the format had to be consistent, and we had to be able to have confidence that what we were sending to our executive leaders was reflected in our tooling. And so what's somewhat unique about our solution is the sequential nature of the workflow. Instead of the variability you'll find often with chatbots, we have a structured sequential workflow, essentially an agentic pipeline, with the input being a templated prompt that's also somewhat unique. As I mentioned, it's not a chatbot, and so we're able to control the input, which is a prompt template, as well as the interaction between the agents. That ultimately gave us the consistency and accuracy we needed to have confidence in sending these to executive leaders. So we'll follow this workflow from left to right. Initially, the domain analysis prompt is sent to the FinOps agent. This prompt has a set of criteria for the analysis, as well as context about the domain the agent is performing the analysis on. The agent has at its disposal a couple of important MCP tools. The first is our billing data. It's important to point out initially, we tried to wire up the billing API for Cloud Zero directly, just wrapping the open API spec in a MCP server. But the volume of billing data quickly overflowed the context window and tool use failed. So we had to pivot and write our own custom MCP tool for the billing data. And what this provided for us was even more consistency and even more confidence around no hallucinations. The Cloud Zero MCP tool returns structured data to the agent and simplifies the task that it has to perform with the analysis. As I mentioned, Optimization Hub data from Cost Optimization Hub is also fetched from an MCP tool, and these are combined with organizational data to generate that cloud cost analysis and the cost intelligence by the FinOps agent. Once that's completed, it's handed off to the summary agent. That agent has a couple important tools at its disposal, but at first, as I mentioned, synthesizes that analysis into a distilled, executive-friendly narrative, right? Our customers and stakeholders don't have the expertise of a FinOps analyst. So we have to bring the data to them in a format that they'll understand and they'll engage with. And that's the key role of the summary agent. The two tools the summary agent uses, first and foremost, is an HTML template tool. We evaluated a couple of options, and we knew ultimately these executive summaries had to be consistent. They had to follow the same format across the board. You couldn't have one director getting format A and another director getting a completely different format, or every time they're seeing these summaries, there's something new or different. We wanted the consistency so that as they began to adopt and learn from these summaries, they had the reliability and they knew what to look for every month they received them. So the tool for HTML rendering essentially is a Pug template underneath the hood. It takes in a JSON object from the summary agent and renders that as HTML. The agent then passes it to the fourth tool, which is an SES service. And it's important to note our cloud native products team built a fantastic SES wrapper that's really simplified this tool. It was virtually plug and play to send emails to every director at Grainger. So we talked a little bit about the workflow. Let's talk about the architecture. Nightingale consists of really two core runtimes. We've separated the agentic layer from the MCP layer, and these two runtimes interact through the MCP protocol. On the left are our two agents. On the right-hand side are the four MCP tools. And what's nice about this partitioning is we can continue to refine and add new tools to our MCP server layer without a single code change to the agentic layer. Authentication is handled out of the box by Agent Core. In this case, we're leveraging IAM authentication for its simplicity, but we evaluated OAuth as well, and ultimately, for us, in this specific use case, IAM authentication was ideal. The tools themselves are backed by data layers using Redshift, exports from Cost Optimization Hub, and external APIs and services. So this is the output, right? As I mentioned, the output is the actual product, not the input. Let's step through this executive summary a little bit. And again, the idea here is that a leader can walk away in 5 minutes with everything they need to know about their cloud cost and usage. They weren't coming to our tools, so we brought the data to them. At the top is the headline metrics, right? What is the trend for the last 90 days? And what is essentially the total spend for that time period? Followed by key points. And so with this, right, we really wanted to keep the most important information up at the top so that if they only had 2 minutes, they would have sufficient information to walk away with at least the bare minimum they needed to know about their cloud footprint. Followed by a deep dive, which goes in a bit further into service and account-driven cost increases or decreases. We also highlight potential anomalies. And like what's important to note here is this is agentic inference, right? Most people reading this would not know that this was generated by an agent unless we put the little disclaimer at the bottom. And we found with this that in many ways it met the same specialist quality as our FinOps team. And as I said though, as opposed to a matter of a full day, it can now create this summary in minutes. Lastly, we have recommendations and outlook. And this is kind of key. Currently, we're in the inform phase of the FinOps lifecycle. as we begin to democratize and broaden adoption across the organization. But we really want to get to this place where we're operating, right? We're optimizing and operating within FinOps capabilities. And that's where the recommendations come in. These provide real actionable insights for our people leaders, aggregated at their level and tied to a dollar amount. They can pass this along to their tech leads, and these tech leads can take action by identifying the root account where these resources live. Similar to Mondelez, we're able to attribute account level ownership because each account belongs to a specific team. And lastly, the outlook. This contains essentially a forward-looking perspective, assuming the recommendations are acted upon and current trends continue. So, where do we see this going? There's a lot of interesting possibilities here. I think there's nothing unique to FinOps, as I mentioned, when it comes to this scaling problem. We've spoken with DevOps, SRE teams, other platform engineering teams who are in a similar boat, right? They have critical insights trapped behind dashboards, and the customers and stakeholders simply aren't coming to them. But also within FinOps itself, we have multiple personas that we serve. It's not just domain and product leaders. We serve product owners, finance, procurement, executives. Each one of those personas has a different way of working and ultimately a different signal channel where we need to bring the data to them. So as we look to extend this tool, I believe it involves a number of things. First and foremost, we didn't use Agent Core Gateway when we started. At the time, they didn't support native MCP tool use. Today, now that it's GA, they do. And so adding Agent Core to Nightingale really unlocks the scalability of adding more MCP tools and servers at the enterprise level. We can start pulling right-sizing recommendations for Kubernetes and pushing pull requests to GitHub repos for each specific Kubernetes deployment. Or we might be creating Jira stories for Jira projects for our product teams. It could be pushing data to Power BI dashboards for our finance team, all controlled through the MCP layer and routed via Agent Core Gateway. At the agent layer, as we continue to expand, we're looking at adding more agents with varying expertise, right? We found that it's best to narrow the focus of an agent to one specific use case or one specific field. So efficiency scores, right? As we start meeting our engineering team demographic where they work in developer portals, we could have an agent specialize in building out efficiency scores for each team. This would essentially be followed by an analysis from the executive summary agent and link back to our cloud cost and usage tooling. And finally, to kind of tie it back together, with Project Nightingale, we were able to solve the scalability challenge and began to democratize FinOps by using FinOps quality analysis and meeting an audience of 50 through generative AI solutions. Project Nightingale has unlocked a path for us where we now have a force multiplier that we didn't have before, right? We're a team of 7. There's no possible way we can meet every persona with this level of quality at this scale in a feasible amount of time. As we mentioned, this is only one single channel among many, but now we have the foundation to extend beyond just product and domain leaders. Lastly, thousands of specialist hours are now saved, right? I'm not saying generative AI is replacing specialists. This unlocks our FinOps team to now go focus on the hard problems that humans are good at. Whether that's deep dives into architecture, helping platform teams re-envision a more efficient and effective platform, consulting product owners about TCO. Our team of specialists now has more time to be served to better purposes. So, if you're an SRE, DevOps leader, platform owner, don't just wait for your customers to come to you. Seek out solutions leveraging generative AI and bring the data to them.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, JC, for sharing stories from both of your companies. We heard a little bit about how you can use automation to create a way for the IT department to move at the rate of change of technology and be best at supporting the business. We heard a little bit about how you can use agents in FinOps to create better visibility of costs and revenue implications of IT decisions up all the way to the C-suite. So those were two examples. What I'll leave you with is just sort of a framework to think about how you can be on your own transformation journeys. And just as consumers don't move sequentially through their path to purchase, they jump around through it. Where you might be in this framework might differ based off of your idea or your solution, or where you are simply in your maturity with AI. But I'll leave you with this for you to think about what you might be able to innovate in next, and then we'll leave the extra time that we have for you to come and talk to the speakers afterwards on the side. Thank you. And before my head of marketing kills me, please fill out the survey on the app. Thank you.